So, Flounder Heights. Obviously, it's been released in the workshop. Now, I haven't really seen much in the way of requests. I guess there's not really much to say. Although, well, how did I get to that point that I released Flounder Heights at all? Well, it's actually a long project that happened like across a couple of years, a long while actually, and I'm not even gonna try and justify it. This is just the next how did I get here things, ranty videos again that I've made. But everything that I'm about to describe is, well, as it is. You're free to believe it or not. So, I'm making maps. Yeah. I've made Flounder Heights. I don't intend to stop there. But this started a really long time ago. And, to kind of get into how it really started, like anything, you kind of have to be reminded of the fact that I've been cheating hacking games since I was like 10 years old. Not necessarily hacking games, but modifying games even just through cheats that I would receive through automation. Like, I had a Cyclo-DS when I was a kid, a Cyclo-DS Evolution card. I still have a Cyclo-DS Evolution card. I actually had to buy one because my original one, which lasted for a good 5 to 6 years, that cartridge died from overuse because the sticker was peeling off, and not only that, the pins that actually go into the DS to make it work were just not functioning anymore. And, you know, it wore out, so I now have a new card of the same model, thankfully. It's just that the shell is white instead of black now, but that doesn't matter to me. But I have modified games like that for a while. I played Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, with cheats alone, and specifically hacked Pokemon for other people, along with playing various games with cheats, like Super Mario 64 DS, while trying to understand what a 3D platformer was. Now, my stance on cheats and modifications are probably well beyond the bounds of most people, but most people in the Splatoon community would probably, if they knew the methods used to get half the assets used in the community, they wouldn't even they would begin to question their own morality, because getting them requires hacking current games, that is Splatoon and Splatoon 2, in order to even obtain the assets in them at all. Now, I won't go into detail on those, as I don't necessarily want that flow to stop, as, you know, it's what gives us maps and models and the rest of it. But you kind of have to understand that it comes from that, somewhat. You have to delve into those areas in order to get the good things out of them. I think there's a quote for this, but I can't remember it at the moment, so I'm not going to try and pretend I know. But I have been cheating hacking games for a long time, and interested in glitches. In fact, being interested in glitches is what got YouTube to recommend me the SM64 videos that ended up leading me into the whole Super Mario 64 debacle, which allowed me to learn more about color codes and how they work. So, this is not new, okay? So, for a while, I'm sure people were aware in like 2015 or something. I think it was like 2015. But there was someone who was hacking Splatoon called NWPlayer123, and I'm sure you're aware of them because this is how the whole Octoling thing started. They were hacking the game for a while, and when I first bought Splatoon was just a game. It wasn't necessarily important. to me until I realized the potential it had in Gary's Blood and Sauce Filmmaker later, which, you know, leads to now. So, NW Player hacked the first Splatoon for a while. And, they used hacks on the game as well, obviously. That's kind of what they're known for. They used hacks while playing the game, though, because they swapped most of the Inkling Girls assets with the Octoling Girls assets. And due to the way Splatoon 1 reads, you know, player side data and such, apparently this method was client side, and I can prove it because I have a screenshot of when we were playing. I have a screenshot and a video of the screenshot. The video is from their end, but I do have a screenshot from that video, at least the day when we played, because because this is going to lead into that point. I did play with them multiple times. But they were still, on all accounts, an Inkling to everyone else. They were just an Octoling whenever they streamed and or like showed themselves in gameplay, except for certain circumstances, especially the Octoling Online videos by themselves and another user named PRGilland. The one with PRGilland was actually a play session between PRGilland, NW Player, and myself, because we did that in August something, and that was during the third Splatfest of the Europe side, because I'm Australian and own the European version of Splatoon 1, and it's the better translation, get out. So, because of that, it was during my Splatfest, I was saved from the quote-unquote save data wipeage, the save data wipeout, versus PRGilland, who ended up having the game frozen for like a good few weeks before the Splatfest over there came back and filtered the plaza to receive Splatfest posts only, because the Octoling's animation data was corrupt, and that's what would cause the plaza to freeze with it, which got misconstrued when news articles would write on the thing saying, if you play with an Octoling in multiplayer, your save data is going to get wiped out, which, no, it doesn't touch your save data. It just soft locks the game upon reboot because it can't load the animation data for the Octoling. It doesn't actually touch your save file. That's wrong, and that's not what actually happens. To a general player, okay, fine, but in technical terms, it is not touching your save data, and it is not what causes your game, playing with an Octoling does not affect your save data. It only affects your game if you leave it in there. Like, it becomes a part of your save data, sure, but it being in there doesn't wipe it out. It's not like some sort of, it's not like it just erases everything in existence. It's just there, and it's a value that's not meant to be there. I'm pretty sure, like, if you could if there's a Splatoon 1 save editor or anything, you could probably I don't know, but let's just assume in a perfect world there was a save editor for this thing, you could just edit that value out for the Octoling and replace it with, like, no one, so then there would be no Inkling or Octoling there, and your save would be just fine. All your values would be there as normal, without issue. So, but as NW was playing, hacking the game for, like, ages and ages, I began to become more and more intrigued by both the game and the prospect of hacking it one day. So, quick cutaway here. There was also another instance where we played in September, literally the day of the Art Science Fest, and because I was, at this point, I was aware of the freeze, of the save data freeze. Since I continued playing the North-South Pole Fest, I had not really considered the freeze, since, NW player was gone from my plaza anyway. But we played again in September with a test account. They originally asked me to play with them, testing out Rainmaker before it was released, which showed up as tower control on my screen. I used a test account for that because the game froze on us. Fine, whatever. But my save data on that was still fine. I then played again with them with that same test account the night of the Art Science Fest, and coincidentally the Messy Tidy Fest on my end. The night of that, we played again, and that's when the Octoling leak spread like wildfire, because that's when we played again with the Octoling in front of a wider audience on stream. There's even a news article with a picture, which actually is myself next to them. They're using the client-side hack on me that all Inkling girls look like Octoling girls, but I can prove, because I took a photo of when the game froze after that, I can prove that I was in fact an Inkling, because, well, I have a picture of the Inkling of me upon reboot, and I only turned the Wii U on normally. I'm a regular player, darn it. in terms of Wii U stuff, I can't really asset hack to that degree. There's only minor stuff like color stuff, and I only feel comfortable doing color stuff, so I'm not doing the Octoling hacks like on my end. So yeah. Anyway, back to the explanation. Pass me, go. Eventually, I managed to obtain the game's files one day. Once, I think there was a firmware leak or something for a hack for the Wii U, and because of that, there soon after came a tutorial to be able to dump the game's files using a program and going through some pretty hefty steps and such. And now I have, I think, like 5 dumps of the first game. There were at least 3 that I did myself, and there were 2 others that I downloaded off of 2 other sources, one of which being the CDN servers that data, like updates and such, come from, and the other one being just some random place. I don't remember exactly, but it wasn't from there, because it was I was trying to search for an original dump of the first firmware of the game, because what's happened with the game now since I've applied all the updates to it is that files that are named the same have replaced one another, and well, that doesn't necessarily sit well with the gear when there were beta versions of the gear that were overwritten by newer pieces. Example, the rodeo shirt. The rodeo shirt used to be the shirt extravaganza in a launch build of Splatoon 1, but because Splatoon got popular and they made a gear update, the rodeo shirt replaces it in the files. It's the same name, it's just that the files inside are different. So that's that, you know, I had to find those dumps, some of those kinds of dumps, in order to find the gear for Fission, for the gear packs. So I had access to these files for a while. And you know, since NW Play, I ended up rolling off this whole thing of Splatoon and just going to generic hacking stuff in general and not really focusing on a specific game. I decided, okay, I'm just gonna take over whatever Splatoon stuff from here on out, I guess. Since I already did stuff with the gear, I guess I can just see what I can do. I have these files, I might as well do something with them. So, like, I began to look at the files themselves, and you begin to see a pattern with the files in Splatoon's file system, because they're all labeled, and it's pretty, if you have a good memory, and since I'm so attached to the series, it's really easy to remember what exactly a specific type of thing is when it's, you know, organized neatly into its function and what it does, which is enough to be able to know what a thing is at all. And if not, you know, you can just load it up and see whatever it is in particular. Like for the gear's kind of the most somewhat confusing part, because like Splatoon, actually no, both games have like the prefix. Every Splatoon model has a prefix of like what it generally is, if it's a clothing, if it's a non-playable character, if it's a map, etc. And you know, the clothes are the hardest thing, because like the actual names, the next thing after that is what the actual name is internally. And like, goodness, the clothes are confusing because they're only 3 digits. Or like three letters, 3 whatevers. Like, it's only 3 in an entire name, and it kind of gets confusing. That's the only thing though, because the rest of it is kind of just internal Japanese stuff. And it's not even in Japanese, it's in Roman letters, what we would call English letters, but it's basically just spelled out in Japanese. Now, I see no reason why, since you're not supposed to be able to see these files in the first place, why Nintendo of America would translate half of this. Especially when, in the maps and models themselves, there are a lot of inconsistencies with how they call certain English objects. Like, the colour grey, for example. Half of the models have it as grey with an A, and then there's other models which have grey with an E, and they can be even inside the same upper model file, because Splatoon uses a generic Nintendo model system that's used by a lot of Nintendo games. Like, late Mario games probably use the same format. There's a number of games that use a similar format, because, you know, it's why make a new format if the current one works just fine? That makes perfect sense. So, like, there's a container, and then inside that container is what the content is, and Splatoon models contain, you know, the model, the textures, and animations, which are a pain to deal with, which I'll go over later. So, like, and then inside the model is lots of little models, and, like, inside the same file, these inconsistencies can exist. So, I find it a little hard to believe that Nintendo of America or whatever did that, when I imagine the only thing they even had to touch were text files and some other things, so then, you know, it's readable in English, versus all the technical stuff they wouldn't even need to do, because all the dev stuff is handled over there in Japan, while localization is just the rest, and anything that is just handled overseas. Like, I wouldn't think that they would be in charge of naming half of these models into half English names if it's not even, you know, if there's no point. Why would you? We're not even supposed to be able to see them in the first place. So I guess the Japanese developers just know a shred of English and not much more than that. So, like, after a while of browsing these files, it was very easy for me to be able to see what they all were, and eventually I came to the conclusion of what half of them were, and I found out what the maps were. Then I came across a script at the time of a generic BFRES loader script, and all I used it for was to load models into Blender, which, you know, I had to use the script in that, so then I could load the models at all. And I then got very interested in because Inkopolis Plaza was already ported, and I'll explain why that is so bad in a moment. Because Inkopolis Plaza was already ported, and it is ported, you can tell, because Splatoon's models kind of have a certain look to them. If Inkopolis Plaza can be ported, why not the rest? So then I had no idea how to do that. There were no resources on a model-based map in what it's supposed to do, how it's supposed to work. Nothing. There was nothing on that, and there still is nothing on that. It's really, really, really hard at first to someone who knows absolutely nothing. And I already had the ability to cheat games before, so it was hard. So then I whined on Twitter and, you know, kind of had a little sad about it. And then, like, that was shortly before I decided I was going to make the last video I was going to make about SM64, the one with Blue and his past. It was just a clarification video on what happened in the events between like Coif and the rest of it. Like, that whole thing, what I could envision, what it actually was. Like, you know, I just decided to film it because why not? And as I was filming it, I then got contacted by the real user who, at the time, we were just friends in the way friends are on Steam and whatnot, you know, just there. We would only talk every so often, not necessarily what ended up happening after that, because he talked with me, and I told him, because he'd also made a map that was based around a model porting. Now, people have assumed that, since, you know, I use this as an example often, that it was the other way around, that I specifically went to him for this. No, I even saved the chat log of the Steam chat on the day we did it, because I used it as proof against him later when he'd forget about it. So, I was in the middle of Fraps recording, and because he'd sent a notification, Fraps spazzed and my memory on the computer had a fritz, and my mouse spazzed for about 5 minutes, so I couldn't exactly respond to him immediately. So he came to me about the whole thing, and eventually took on the challenge himself once I suggested what I was doing and what I talked about literally the day before. So at the time, that was his promise. That was the promise he intended to make. And for the next few days, I then, you know, sent him the assets, because what I had done after I'd went on Twitter was I uploaded the map assets, that is, the simple bfres files, and I would also give him the script if necessary. The simple bfres files, and which are the word bfres, I use that. That is your Splatoon model file, or Nintendo in general. I don't think every Nintendo game uses bfres, but a lot of the more current ones now do, and it's a common format. So if you hear me say bfres a lot in the video, that's probably why. There are older Nintendo formats that are like the precursor to bfres. I know there's like BRRES instead, like like Brres instead of bfres, but like I think it's bfres because it was based around the Wii U, and it's like, you know, it's, you know, architecture and whatever. I'm not totally well versed in all that, but it's simple to understand. The Wii U was HD, and bfres was on that system was so then they could make HD models, I guess. They're still pretty low. They're still pretty whatever, but you know, whatever flows. So anyway, I uploaded all those files up to like websites and such. I actually uploaded them to multiple websites separately, because my internet connection was, and kind of still is, really bad. But back then it was worse, so I just had to deal with what I had, and the files are huge, so especially the map files, so god. But I uploaded them in the hope that someday I may encounter someone who may know what to do with them, or how to help me deal with them, which my whole point was so that I could learn myself how to do it, because there were no tutorial guides. There were no one was willing to clarify this, because most map tutorials on YouTube and the like focus on how you make maps specifically in the source engine, specifically inbuilt with like source engine stuff, not porting assets from another program or game or whatever, actually making a map inside the source engine's tools, using Hammer to build a map using brushes and all that stuff, which people have made recreations of, and that's kind of what inspired me to specifically start the project, because there was a recreation of Flounder Heights someone uploaded before I got the chance to whine on Twitter, and Fission, I showed it to Fission, and Fission was proud of it, and, you know, great to the guy who made the effort to make the map, but it kind of illustrates why the maps need to be ported, because everything in the map was straight. The textures were dull because they used generic source engine textures, and the map itself was a recreation of only the arena, not the background. The one thing I specifically remember about Flounder Heights that I really, really like, and you can see in my port now, is the background has, on the Team B spawn, I'll go over that in a moment, but before I get into that point, I might as well, to go completely off the rails here, how Splatoon works in terms of the teams and colours and such. Which is why you kind of probably confused as to what I mentioned before about the Team B spawn. Splatoon's maps are mirrored so much that you can barely see the differences if there are differences, and there are some. Port Mackerel and Walleye Warehouse are actually not mirrored perfectly. It's kind of awkward to look at now, because, I didn't know this for a while, but Splatoon works in terms of the ink color pairings that there are two sides, obviously, but one side is Team A, one side is Team B, and the stage's orientation is designed around Team A or Team B. Now, the arena itself is mirrored, so you can barely see if there are any differences, yes, but bits outside of the stage or within the stage can be different. For example, Port Mackerel has in Splatoon 1 only, because they changed it in Splatoon 2 and I hate it. Splatoon 1, on one side, Port Mackerel has wooden flooring, the other side has steel flooring. Team A has wooden flooring, I think, and it never changes so that Team B has the wooden flooring. You get where I'm going with this? Not only that, the ink color pairings are assigned to Team A or Team B. You can't have, say, the yellow and purple pairing in Splatoon 2. You can't have purple be on Team A because it's already assigned to be on Team B. The stage's orientation will not change around that. There's also a Team N, which is generic assets like those blow-up balloon things that are all over the stage that kind of look like fitness bags or whatever they are. Those things are coloured with the Team N colour. So are the tops of Urchin Underpass. So is the tape at the end of the match when the game finishes. The tape is coloured with the Team N colour. That's Team Neutral. Team A, Team B, Team N. It's not actually called that in the files. It's just the first colour, the second colour, the third colour, but Team Alpha and Team Bravo are actual names in the game, so Team A, Team B, and Alpha and Bravo sync up to Team A and Team B, first colour, second colour, so that makes sense. And then, Team N, we just call it Team N because it's neutral, it's the neutral colour, it's just the colour that's neutral between both teams. Both teams will see the neutral colour, no matter if they're Team A or Team B. So, and Splatfests, for example, the latest Splatfest, I know the one coming is Knights vs Wizards as of this recording, but the latest one, Pancakes vs Waffles, there was brown yellow, and then there was blue purple, but the Team N was a pink colour. And both teams could see that. That's how the splat zones were so visible. You getting it? That's why the playground is always on the Team B side. Anyway, that's just your little random tangent about Splatoon in colours and how they work. It is always like that. It always works like that no matter what. And yeah, that's how I made a whole bunch of videos on this channel relating to how the colours look like in Splatoon 1, because that's how the colours work. And I in fact the Team B color of the respective pairing was also put on the dummies, on the big dummies that are supposed to be Team B in Splatoon 1. Did anyone notice that? I bet nobody did, but I was just honoring the original pairing and how it understood that. Like, it was the opposite team. It would be Team B if it was Team A, and it would be Team A if it was Team B. And, you know, all the other ones are neutral colored. So anyway, that's just, yeah, anyway. The Team B spawn has a playground near it. You look to the right of it, and there's a little playground of squid rides dotting the area. In my port, I've specifically collisioned that whole thing because I like it so much. It's so cute. That's literally the first time I played the stage in the game. The first thing I noticed when the stage ended was, and like I think the first thing I said in reaction to it was, "Oh, they have a little playground. That's so cute." So it stuck with me. I really, really love the way Flounder Heights looks, and seeing, you know, it kudos to you on the effort done to recreate Flounder Heights. It's not Flounder Heights to me, especially when it's in a floating void of nothing and using like Source's normal skybox and whatever. Like, I don't want to levy these criticisms against the person like they could do something about this. These are just inherent things that they had that are going to exist, but that's kind of why I wanted to pursue porting the maps instead of recreating them anyway, because Splatoon's models aren't straight in that way, and if they are straight, they disguise it very well by having the textures be a little wonky then, or having like things be an awkward size or something. It's not so rugged, and like even Splatoon 2 with its more rugged appearance now doesn't nearly look the same. It still sort of looks off. That's the point of it. So having a recreated Flounder Heights was kind of what drove me to start the whole thing at all. But like, there was no tutorial on that sort of thing, so I was kind of stuck. So I really needed to see if there was any way that I could learn any way on how to port from Splatoon to the Source engine. So User, like I told User that I told User that I'm going to refer to him as User throughout most of this, since, you know, that he wanted me to call him that for a while, before the whole rest of it, but now I'm only going to refer to him as User. So before that point I was calling him DA, but he was rather annoyed by that, and later on so was I, but so whatever, that's not really worth delving into. So he then ended up promising that, and ended up helping for a few days after that, after I would link him all the downloads I had up of everything and all that. So he made a promise that day then to start the maps then. He specifically, and I can give a chat log if you want proof, he specifically made that promise to me. And, like, not to imply that I wanted him to do all of the work. I wanted him to at least be able to help me learn how those things worked as well. And for a while, and for a really long while, I implied that for a while, and it only took him more so around the end for him to actually help me with that whole thing. So, but for a while he was fine with doing it just himself, so I didn't bother him about that then, because he said he was fine with it, so why should I question that? But the few days after that, he then made a map from, you know, Splatoon, the Octostomp map that I've distributed on DeviantArt, which I know it's broken probably because I forgot to distribute the skybox with it. but there were actually more bugs that I needed to fix with it, so I'm still kind of working on it. It's just I'm not really. I still need to work on it to fix stuff on it. So, but it's there, and like I have made a lot of pictures of it demonstrating what it is, so it does exist, and I wouldn't try and like. You would be able to tell if I copy pasted it over the actual game, so it is a Source Engine port. I'm just still working on it at the moment, since, you know, it exists. But he made Octostomp then, and really poorly, because I'll mention that later on. But he made Octostomp then, and, you know, then he was being really ambitious, like, I think that was the first time we played in Gmod multiplayer. He wanted to show me what Gmod multiplayer was, and he initially called it like observation, like what we were kind of hoping could be made a reality, but in actuality it really wasn't. Like he was saying, we're gonna look to these maps as an example of what we could potentially do, but that really never was it, and never really was an instance of that, especially since it wouldn't really even really be possible due to the limitations that I ended up coming across later. But that, like, yeah. So, but Octostomp was pretty much ready for release, barring the fact that there were multiple issues that I encountered, like, only more recently that I had to fix and were a pain to even fix at all. So, after that, well, while that was happening, as explained, he taught me what Gmod multiplayer was, and simply, while he'd made Octostomp for a while, and even showed me Gmod multiplayer through it while we were, like, bug testing it initially, he didn't work on it for a long time. He would hint towards it, but didn't. And this was during the time we were beginning to really bond together, and I was having, and it's not like he wouldn't mention it at all, because for the first while after, because we used the map, I think it's like a, it's probably ported from the game, but like, super sized up and all that. Like, we were exploring the map port of, Hyrule. It's from Ocarina of Time, and it's just multiple areas from the game linked. Extremely well done, actually. Like, the whole map, whoever made it needs to, like, get a standing ovation from the entire Gmod community, because that is just amazing. But supposedly we were looking towards it for what we could make. He was assuming we could make a Splatoon multiverse map at the time, which isn't gonna be possible because of the way, you know, Source Engine works with limitations in terms of size and limitations and such, so all of the maps pretty much have to be separate. And he was really ambitious with all this, and because of that, gave me way too much faith for my own good, because I would believe most of this, because, like, well, he's the one who made a model-based map. Who am I to not believe him, since I know literally nothing myself? So, if this is possible, then hooray, right? And, you know, I was trying to be lenient because he had all these issues, like, at the time, especially with socialization, because, after a while, he only ever felt comfortable talking around me, and we ended up finding each other in Discord and doing, and specifically talking to each other for, like, an entire year. So, he had an attachment, and especially up to, June of that year, which was 2017. All of this is 2017. And that was when it was like, we'd had so many Gmod sessions at that point. Like, I was hoping that we could get to work on some things at some point, but, like, he wasn't, he kept telling me that what I was doing was fine, and that what he was doing was something, but, you know, everyone's so demotivated in this community. So at the end of June of that year, he then asked, would you like to ship with me, which I then rejected. But then he got really upset, despite the fact that, we'd been laughing and having fun in multiple Gmod sessions. Like, to clarify, we watched multiple videos, he played multiple games, shared multiple memes, would joke around and have fun, laugh. I had made lots of recreational comics of events, funny things that had happened in the server. Like one instance where we were on a Mario Kart track, one of the very, 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 very first Gmod sessions we ever had, and we had the ink cart models. We were driving in them, and we decided to drive around the track. The controls were really bad, and we were at the finish line, and he then told me, just hold forward, it'll be okay. And so then I did that. I held forward, and then for some reason I swerved off the track into the abyss, and all I did was hold forward. And that's just one example out of many. He showed me many servers after that. Many games, even like adventure games and platformy stuff that I'd been put off by before that, and now I was actively participating in it for a good 3 or so months. Like he'd been doing this for how many months? He came to me in March initially, so it was then June, so that's 3 months of just Gmod multiplayer stuff and various calls while doing so. So he asked then to ship, and then I rejected it, and then he got upset about it. I didn't understand that because, I don't perceive love as something that's technically that tangible, especially considering I live in Australia, guys. Can you really feasibly attain a relationship with someone I can only speak to through a screen, even if I'm talking to you through the same microphone I'm using to say all this? It's kind of confusing when when I can only socialize with you on these occasions. And I've watched so many movies and stuff about love, and because they're all fantasy stuff, by association I perceive that as well. And I know it's a real thing. I'm mature enough to understand that it's a real thing that people do and have interest in. But if we're going to enter a ship with all the generic shippy pictures and just sitting together and stuff like that, and only treating it as a superficial relationship on that level instead of the actual the actual times and good times we can have together, like the 3 months we spent without having to acknowledge that at all, just generally having fun in Gmod over a project that he was delaying because of that. Yeah, it is a fantasy to me. So it's not something I don't feel like that way towards other people. However, that does not mean I don't care about other people when they are my close friends. When I was with User for the good 2 years that it was, legitimately, when you are that close on my friends list that I'm interacting with you every day and laughing and chatting with you in calls, just like how it was with the YTR people, and I'm still with a few of them, but for much lesser, but not entirely gone. But if you are that close of a friend that I'm talking with you every day, not only do I still care about you like, friend is probably as high a level as shipping is to other people, because I'm telling you to my family at that point. I'm telling you to my friends, I'm telling stories about you and me of what we've done to other people, and I'm specifically, like, browsing your feed more often than not to see what you're potentially interested in, so that, like, say your birthday comes around, I make a thing for you based around what your interests are. And I did that twice for him, based around reactionary comics he made, because he liked those things. And it was just jokes that we had, that he'd had going for a while. Even things that I think he would have forgotten, that I ended up remembering for the sake of, you know, caring about someone else, without having to specifically acknowledge that we're in a relationship, or that, you know, like, we're anything more than friends. Like, really, really, really good friends. That really good friends are important to each other. So I rejected that, and then he had then later on went on searching, and then that's when the whole Ellie thing happened. But he didn't touch upon the map project at all during that year until September. And by that point, I had begun to think to myself, I can load these maps models in Blender. And which was how I ended up starting the initial inspiration for the project anyway, because I could load them in Blender. So I should probably organize the maps based around what they look like in like, you know, the game itself, because the map models and models within the map that serve a distinct purpose are different. They are different Bfres models, and they are different. They are certainly different, because when you load one model, you won't see the rest of it. So that's when I began, while he was with Ellie, and then, you know, later on he broke up, but, you know, whatever. While he was with Ellie, I began to turn on the game to specifically search for what maps were on, and, you know, what their turf war orientation is, because their ranked ones can be different and have, like, extra props, or extra props added and or removed at any point. So I had to use a website for that, because Splatnet at the time, because I owned the European version of Splatoon 1, my time zone was synced to Europe's time zone, and guys, like, I don't exactly live all the way over there. I live actually closer to Japan, so in terms of time zones, so it's a little confusing to tell what time means what, especially when there's a lot of text on the page. So I had to use another website that would actively convert the time to what my computer's set to. So yeah, and now I can't actually use Splatnet, or it's, you know, or it's websites that relied on it, because, you know, now Splatnet is down and gone, and now I have to, if I want references from the game, I have to hope by chance the map is there at all. The sad life I live now. Anyway, but we didn't touch on it until September, when, after I had to end up organizing the maps myself, he then decided we should start Skate Park, Blackberry Skate Park, and oh boy, like, it kind of speaks for itself when, by that point, you could tell there was a shred of apathy from promising but not actually delivering the thing, due to having to hide the fact that he loved me in the first place. But whatever. And this is evident because I had to end up organizing the maps because of an instance where he wouldn't listen to me. The only reference screenshot I had at the time of Skate Park was a top-down of the turf war map, because it was a turf war pairing of color that was on the screenshot. and it was just a top-down shot. I think it's just the shot before Judd comes up and tells you the results, but it was literally just that's the only screenshot I had of skate park that I wanted to do. And I really wanted to do skate park because, I wanted to do this in relation to the main story that I've made at the time, which I'll go into that later. But skate park, we had an issue with skate park because there's an object specific to it that is not loaded in the maps file because it has its own animations and is placed dynamically around the map like 4 times. There is an object relative to Blackville Skate Park. I mean, it's not in any other map, so obviously it's relative to skate park only at this point, called like Air Dancer. It's just called Air Dancer in the files. And the Air Dancer is, the balloon things you see at like car shops and the like. It's those things that are constantly filled with air dancing in a balloon and whatever. And in the screenshot, there were about 4 of them placed on both sides. And even though I provided this screenshot, he kept questioning to me the importance of these air dancers in terms of how close they were to the stage, even though they're literally on the other side of the fence. It took until both of us booted up the game and opened a private battle for him to be able to see that, yes, these things are insanely close to the stage, and if we don't put them in, we're not being accurate to the game. So after that point, that was what spurred me to make the map layout files in Blender on their own, just moving the assets around. So all I was doing was basic, moving around on axes and such. I wasn't focused on anything more than that. So I then did that for every single stage, because that's all I could do, and he wasn't willing to teach me the rest, because of course, if I'm fine with doing it myself, why should I have to tell her anything? His mentality, probably. So we made skate park, and we promoted it in the group for a while, and then, it never happened. We never actually released it. It definitely was made in a beta, and I'm also working on that too, because that also has a few bugs in it. I also released that on DeviantArt as well as a beta, and there are actually a few bugs in that, which someone ended up coming to me later on, quote unquote, fixing it, but I have to work with them now to ensure they keep game accuracy, because that's going to drive me up a wall if we're game inaccurate. Because